Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Monday, March 16th, 2026. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Today, I am joined again by Aaron Campo and our engineer, Lickett. Well, the Sounders are coming off quite a week, going 3-0 in 3 road games, with the most recent one coming on Sunday against the San Jose Earthquakes. The Sounders made 8 changes in that game from Thursday, gave 2 players their first ever MLS starts, and had 6 players making their first starts of the season. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective, as they got a goal from Paul Rothrock and rode Andrew Thomas's hot hand to their 3rd shutout in 8 days. All in all, really not bad. Aaron, I don't know, how are you feeling about things right now?
I feel pretty great about things. This was not a game that I think the Sounders win if you replay it 100 times. I don't think they win it all that often, but they won the one that actually goes down in the standings. And, they've got 6 points from the first 3 of this 5-game road trip. Minnesota looks eminently beatable at home. If they can come back to Seattle on April 12th with 9 road points, man, that's incredible. That would put them, if they can match last year's home form on a over 60 point per game pace for the year. And I think you have to feel great about it. And the Sounders absolutely got some luck in this game. San Jose was not as clinical as I'm sure they would have liked to have been. Some big time saves from Andrew Thomas. Of course, the incredible clearance from
Tino Lopez.
But the reality is that when you have a defense as organized as the Sounders do, and when you have a team full of guys as committed to the cause as the Sounders are, you're going to win more games like that than you probably should. What the numbers would tell you you should expect to do. They pour everything into every game. As long as there's a chance that they can get a result, they're going to put everything on the line to get it. They have a winning mentality. Winners win, losers lose, right? And, the Sounders went out there and they won. They shut out the Earthquakes for the first time in almost a year.
Oh, man, that's a good stat. Yeah. That's a good shout. Now I'm going to look that up. But you're right. They had not done that in a long time.
Yeah, the Earthquakes have been scoring like crazy this year. They haven't played a ton of.
It was the first goal the Earthquakes had given up, actually.
Yeah.
This year.
First goal they've given up this year, right? And they've also, they hadn't scored that many. They'd only scored 6 in their first 3. But
yeah.
And, looking at the Earthquakes in that game, they looked like a good team. I don't think that this is a bad team that had just gotten lucky with early season results. I don't think they're going to be competing for the supporter shield or anything, but they added a very good player in Timo Werner, who I thought looked pretty good in that game. Yeah. I think he's gonna settle well in MLS and be a really key addition. I think that this, based on what I've seen from them, they look very much like a playoff team. And if you can beat a team like that on the road, you got to feel pretty good about it. They've got 9 points from 4 games. You got to feel great about that. The one loss was to an RSL team that also looks to be pretty good, especially at home. So I'm feeling real good. If every game they'd won this season had looked like that, obviously I'd be a little more concerned about the underlying performances. But if you put a lineup like that out there after smoking the Whitecaps midweek, which also adds to the great mood, you've got to feel pretty good about getting any result you can. You're starting 2 guys that were on loan. You're only getting 45 minutes.
Short-term loans.
Yeah. You're only getting 45 minutes from Jesus Ferrer and Albert Rusnak. You're still missing Pedro de la Vega. You're still missing Jordan Morris. You're still missing Yamar. And they just went out.
30 minutes from the Roldans.
Yeah. No Kim Ki-hee. And they went out and they found a way to get it done. And that is what a winning team does. That's what fostering a winning mentality does. And I don't want every game to look like that, but
no,
given the circumstances, I feel pretty great about it.
Yeah, so I looked this up. It looks like the Sounders had played 11 straight against the Earthquakes where they had given up at least 1 goal, and you had to go all the way back to 2021. Interestingly enough, that was the game in San Jose where they won on a very late Jordan Morris goal, if you remember that one. And they, that was the last time they shut out the Earthquakes. They haven't shut them out at home in since 2020. And that was actually in MLS's back group stage play. So They haven't shut them out at Lumen Field since 2017, an active streak still. 2017 is the last time the Sounders shut out the Earthquakes in at Lumen Field. Very much beside the point, but just fascinating piece crazy. Of trivia.
And the Earthquakes in general against everybody have not been shut out since May 17th of last year. So
oh wow.
Yeah. So this is, that's a team that can score some goals. And they didn't do it.
And they generated a lot of chances, and to get to your, to address a little bit more of your point is, the Sounders, there's a lot of, I did a column today, sort of like illustrating some of the stats that illustrated just how sort of under it the Sounders were. They only had like there's a stat called field tilt that mostly is measuring final third entries for each team. And the Sounders tend to dominate this stat. This is like kind of one of their bread and butter stats. But they were down 84-16 percentage wise on field tilt, which is not good. That's best I could tell the lowest that they had been since I started measuring this 2 years ago. So that's not good. They only had 37% possession. That's actually not too crazy, but they are outshot 25-7. The even crazier stat is they gave up 17 corners and they had 0 for themselves. So there was a 17 corner kick disparity between the two teams. That's tied for the largest disparity in MLS history. And suffice to say, none of the teams who were on that list won the game.
Yeah.
And, the Sounders had struggled. One of the things that Brian Schmetzer pointed out in the post game was that, last year they struggled with set pieces. We've talked about it a lot. There's a ton of ways to sort of illustrate it. The best of which is maybe that they gave up 3 set piece goals in the final game against Minnesota United, sort of illustrative of the problem that they were dealing with all of last year. And I didn't count up all the sort of attacking free kicks that San Jose took, but they probably took 3 or 4 of those. So you add those, they had over 20 attacking set pieces, and that they didn't score on any of them. And I'm not going to say that the Sounders defended them all perfectly, but they did what they had to do. There was a lot of sacrificing bodies, a lot of block shots. There's a sequence, around the 35th minute or so where the Sounders blocked like 3 shots in the box, maybe all of them from Jackson Reagan. Just sort of like a real gutsy win. And like you said, you don't want to play like this every week, but when you're facing a situation like they were this week, sometimes you just gotta do what you got to do to win, and you don't spend a lot of time analyzing what you did wrong, you spend a lot more time looking at what you did right.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to look at a game like this, especially given the extenuating circumstances in a game like this. And they gave themselves a chance to win. I think that a lot of the way the rest of the game flowed happened because the Sounders scored a goal in the 20th minute.
Right.
Right.
That's also a good point.
And I think that because they looked pretty sprightly, pretty decent early on.
The first 25 minutes or so, I think they were the better. You could argue they were the better team.
Yeah, they certainly were not as aggressive. Their line of confrontation wasn't as high as you would expect from them normally. But I thought that, they looked perfectly adequate. They were very much in the game. They got a lead early, and San Jose poured it on, and they did what they had to do. And I think that this is similar to that Austin game, right? With Raul and the kindergarten team, where does it really matter how it happened? Like, you got the 3 points. It's ridiculous that you got the 3 points out of this game, and you wouldn't have done it without a very committed, disciplined performance. And yeah, I was really impressed, with the performance that the kids put in. I thought that the veterans that were in there as well put in a really solid performance. I thought Nuhu was great again.
Jackson Reagan
was incredible. Yeah. Nuhu, I will say, because I'm a person who has been hard on Nuhu a lot over the last few years. And this year, I think he is back to his absolute best.
Yes, I would agree with that.
He's been incredible defensively. He seems a little more, I don't want to say disciplined because that's not really the right word, but he seems to have a clearer idea of what he wants to do in the attack when he goes forward. He's put in some pretty dangerous balls. He's picking his spots a little better. So I just want to say he's been great. Reagan was great. Lopez, I thought was really impressive. I hope he did earn that contract because I mean,
he deserves it.
Yeah. Would you rather have Tino Lopez on this team or some random freely available USL level center back? I would certainly like to see what Tino Lopez can do in that spot.
Or some freely available former MLS player who might just be looking for a job. I mean, at this point, Tino Lopez has upside. He's 23 years old. He's got some athleticism. He's got some decent size. But what really impressed me about Tino Lopez was he never looked overwhelmed by the moment. He never was just booting balls out just to sort of clear his lines. There was, he had a couple moments of real composure where he took the space, where he made passes that were incisive, and he just looked like a player who understood that this was a chance to audition, not just a chance to, not blow it. He was out there sort of like trying to win a spot, not avoid losing a spot. And on the same token, Peter Kingston, that was the thing I was most concerned about, to be honest with you. When I saw this lineup, I had kind of figured they were going to do something very similar to this, but I did not think they would start Peter Kingston and Nikola Petkovic in the defensive midfield. And I thought that was probably going to be a little soft, and it wasn't. I don't think that was their problem really at all. Was that defensive midfield was not bad. Petkovic is not exactly he's certainly not a 6. And I think that's maybe something we learned from this, but he has some real attacking instincts. He can spray a ball around. He did good about getting into space. I liked what I saw from him, but he's like I said, he's not a 6. Peter Kingston, I don't know if he's a 6 either, but he showed some of that. And then he also had a couple really good plays. He in another world, he has a second. He helps the Sounders score a second goal. That ball he played to Paul Rothrock right at the start of the second half easily could have been a goal. He had that really nice breakaway where he was selfish, which I'm not going to get too hard on him for, but he made a great run, took a great touch into space, should have passed to Musovski, but yes,
I mean, just another a guy taking the opportunity to be aggressive, make a good play, which I do think is an impressive instinct in a situation like that.
Yeah, I will say if there was one frustration I had in this game, and I wouldn't say it was disappointment because it ended up not being that big of a deal, but I don't know that any of the veterans who came in off the bench actually helped as much as I would have liked. Albert Rusnak in particular, it was his turnover that led directly to the Preston Judd chance that Lopez made that amazing play on. And then he was offside on the goal that would have sealed the game. And I just want to talk about that moment a little bit.
Yeah.
It was funny in the post game. They showed the film, and Brian Schmetzer is like, you fucking blew. What do you say? You owe him a fucking apology or something. I don't know. It was like he said some colorful language to Albert jokingly about Cody Baker, and Albert is just like, just kind of shrugs and it's like, what are you gonna do? And on one hand, I don't really blame him for being offside there, because he was so far offside that there really wasn't. I don't think there was really anything he could have done to get onside. And if anything, what Brian said is, look, just like go farther off, like get out of the way. Like you got to like sort of get out of the way there. And at the same time, I gotta say, I think that call is correct, as much as it was frustrating to see.
I don't understand how anybody could possibly have a problem with that call. If you are in that spot, you are impacting the play. Whether or not the goalkeeper was fully screened and couldn't see the ball, couldn't see the shot, whether or not there was a deflection, none of that stuff matters. He is standing directly between the last defender, the ball, and the goalkeeper. And so that's going to affect something. You just can't be there. And it's frustrating. I would have to watch the full play again to say confidently, but I felt like there was never really any reason for him to make the run that put him in that position in the first place. Like it was just. I
think he was making an honest run off of. Sure. So the way it starts is Osaze has it sort of on the wing, and by the way, it's kind of a funny whole sequence because Rothrock is very close to being offside on the initial ball in. He makes an amazing touch to just bring it down smoothly and to start that sequence. And I think where, if I remember correctly, where Rusnak falls or starts to go offside is he's sort of playing Osaze he's making himself available for Osaze to play him the ball. But then once Osaze plays it square to Cody Baker, there's no hope. He's kind of hopelessly offside at that point. And I think to Brian's point, he's saying like he needs to just get at that point. You got to get out of the way. Like you just don't. You can't. You have to take yourself out of the play. And he doesn't really do that. He sort of. I think he kind of knew also the way he reacts is sort of like sheepish and like, ooh, I wasn't really involved. But and I guess I can see some. I guess I see some people's point. Whereas there was a time when that kind of call was not made very often, but I feel like we see it made all the time now. I mean, it wasn't right. You can go through the last couple of weeks. I guarantee you will find 2 or 3 much more borderline instances where that was waved off, where a goal like that was waved off.
Yeah, I would imagine so. For me, if this isn't an example of the non-involved but impacting offside exception, right, then the rule might as well not exist. Like, this just feels like the clearest possible case of it. I was honestly pretty surprised that it didn't get flagged initially, because I think you had said that the initial VAR review was actually to see if Rothrock was offside initially.
Yeah, that's apparently why it took so long, is they were initially seeing if Rothrock was offside, and it would have been a more straightforward decision. Like there would have been no need to sort of like, well, is he offside or is he not? And I mean, I'll be honest, when I watched the replay, I thought it was probably going to be offside. I guess they ultimately decided that it was too close, and so at that point they went to the next part of the play. I don't love how long it took. This has been sort of like a thing this year where replays seem to be taking way too long. But I don't know. Look, if the call is correct, I just. Like this, like the Hassani Dotson goal should have stood. Like, there's no question about that. This one,
I think it's a pretty obvious call. I think that it's just if that goal comes against us and a player is on the other team is in the same position,
you want it waved off.
Yeah, especially if it goes to review, I think.
Right.
So yeah, it's frustrating. It does suck for Cody because it was a great take. There was a deflection, but he put it in a good spot to force the deflection. I don't think he does. He does have an MLS goal, right?
No, that would have been his first.
That would have been his
MLS
first
goal.
Yeah.
I don't even honestly. I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of goals. Period.
No, not much of a goal scorer.
No, he's not. Although he had two pretty. And here's another player who had not really. He played a little bit. I guess he's played a little bit this year, but he has not had a big role. And he also looked really good. He was matched up against Timo Werner the entire game. And yeah, he got beat a few times, but he never looked out of like he was out of his element or that he was just overwhelmed by anything. Like he was, I thought he held his own. I was really happy with him. Yeah. So much so that I would, I feel very comfortable about him being sort of the back. Essentially he's like the backup left back at this point, even though he was playing right back in this game. But I thought he was good. I liked him a lot. He can do a job, and it was a good reminder that he's never not looked up for it. That's sort of the
right.
He has sort of gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit, but at no point has he looked like that this league is at too high of a level.
He's a great guy to have around. Like he's just the perfect example of this is a really handy guy to have around because there's nothing about his game that screams out, we've got to play this guy more. We've got to find minutes for this guy.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's not this upside that I don't see this upside with him, at least at this point, where it's like, we need to make a spot for this guy to get more minutes. But I never get nervous when I see him in the lineup. Timo Werner has made fullbacks with much greater pedigrees than Cody Baker look pretty foolish. Yeah. And Cody Baker didn't look especially foolish at any point in this game. And, he was in there to do a job, and he did that job really effectively.
Yeah. Cody Baker, by the way, does have one career goal. It was like 3 years ago. So it would have been a nice thing. This feels like it'll be kind of like the Danny Leyva thing, I suppose, although Danny Leyva really does seem snake bit by the lack of goal things. But yeah, I didn't think, I guess Christian and Alex were fine in this game. Osaze was okay. Danny Masovsky did not do enough with his start. I had really high hopes for him. I had really high hopes for Georgie Manungu too. And, he made a couple, it looked like he was close to making something happen, but he was not. I would not say he was a additive part of the Sounders in this one. But Jesus Ferreira made another. He was again one of the Sounders' most dangerous players. A very good performance by him. The ball he gives to Rothrock on the goal is just absolutely perfect. And I'm very much here for Jesus Ferreira redemption tour as a playmaker.
Yeah, he's been incredible this year. I know that some of the advanced metrics haven't loved his performance, but I think that's a lot of that is just they value specific things.
Yeah.
Because he's been, I think, incredible. He's never going to be the ball security robot that Albert Rusnak is. But he's going to take chances and pull off things that Albert Rusnak isn't. And I think that they're pretty complementary players to have. And being able to slot Jesus in and get Albert a little bit of rest and not feel like there's that much of a drop off is extremely, it's a luxury to have that. And I think that, he obviously has a great synergy with Paulo Arriola, but I just feel like he clicks with pretty much all the attacking players on this team.
Yeah.
Like he knows them really well. He's pretty consistently making dangerous passes, anticipating runs. I think that for him to really take the step up to be the player that everybody wants him to be, and the kind of player that I think he knows that he wants to be, he needs to get a little more goal dangerous and be a little more involved closer to goal. But for the contribution that we're getting for him, it's hard to have any complaints. It took him some time to get adjusted, but that happens a lot with attacking players, especially creative attacking players. They can't all be Nico Ladero, right? They can't all hit the ground running with a new team. But he seems very comfortable now in the system, and yeah, he's been. You could make a case that he's been the most important player so far this season.
Yeah,
a pretty,
I think you could definitely make that case. He's only taken 2 shots.
Right.
Both of them are headers, oddly enough.
One of them, I think, forced a pretty impressive save as well.
Yeah, they're both on goal. So I can't sit here and say I remember exactly. Yeah, he did make one that was a very good header, and it was against St. Louis, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, I feel like I remember that one. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that's been sort of the ongoing frustration with him since he got here. He's just not been, for a guy who's a young player who really made his career as a goal scorer. He has not been. I mean, he's not been selfish. He's not been a player who is looking for his own shot as much as you would expect, and he just doesn't shoot as much as you would expect, and he's not really in those parts of the. He's just not even in the box a lot, which is kind of weird. But I'm loving him. If he wants to have 15 assists while playing as a pocket winger, I have absolutely no problem with that. Yeah.
I mean, he had 7 assists last year.
Yeah,
he's got 4 in 4 games this year. So
right. Yeah, he's on a good trajectory for sure. I mean, like I said, I found a lot more to be happy with in this game than I did to be frustrated with. You can definitely throw your hands up and point. There's a lot of things you can point to saying like, well, I don't want to play this way. Okay, fair enough. But I want to win games when we're rotating 8 starters out. I want to be able to do that. I whatever you got to do to get results when you are this rotated, I am here for it. And they set themselves up nicely for Wednesday. I mean, let's not lose sight of that this was a game where they needed to rest a little bit, and they cannot, I think if anything, we saw on Sunday when Vancouver put 6 goals up on Minnesota United that they cannot go into Wednesday assuming they've already won. That would be a huge mistake.
It would, yeah, and that would be a pretty brutal way to knock some of the shine off this early season run.
Sure would.
So yeah, you gotta take care of business. Vancouver is very dangerous. I think you've got to feel comfortable going into that game, right? You gotta, but I mean, weird shit happens, man. In Champions League especially, and I mean. Sounders defensively a little bit better than Minnesota. I think it's fair to say, but still, they don't need to score 6. They only need to score 4. So,
right.
I think it would be real nice to get an early goal on Wednesday and put it to bed. Here's a fun stat before we close out this segment. Guess how many crosses the Sounders had in this game?
10. I don't know.
0
That's
crosses.
Insane.
I assumed it must be wrong, so I went and looked at a different website, and apparently it's not. 0 crosses.
Well, I mean, I guess that doesn't totally shock me because so many of the Sounders crosses, they are not a heavy crossing team, and to the degree they get crosses, it's usually on corners because those are, I believe, recorded as crosses, and they had no corners, so I guess there's some logic. It doesn't. I guess it shouldn't blow my mind that much, but it definitely speaks to. Crosses are coming out of sustained possession usually, and the Sounders did not have a lot of sustained possession, especially in the attacking third, which, I do think that's, again, just to circle back on this, if you're going to be frustrated about the way they played, I will note that they had 4 or 5 high quality attacking sequences in this game. Rothrock himself said, I probably should have had at least 2 goals. There was the one I talked about with Peter Kingston, and then there was that one that came shortly after his goal where Petkovic played him in, and he was in on goal. If he just taps it over to Georgie Manungu, that's probably a goal. But he doesn't really control it at all, and ends up not really turning into much. But those are the kind of, like, the Sounders were willing to attack. This was not just sitting and absorbing. There was a game plan here, and I think that's important to note that this was not just, that they went into this thing with an idea of what they wanted to do, and they basically did it. I'm not going to sit here and say they intended to give up 25 shots or allow the kind of quality opportunities that San Jose got, but this was, I don't know, it was a good performance. I just don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, no, I don't at all. You save the your philosophies of football and sticking to your identity. You save that for when you've got most of your guys available.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're starting, and you're playing at home, you're starting a couple loanies. You just do what you got to do to get it done. And I think that if they get a point out of this game, everybody is probably pretty thrilled. The fact that they got 3 with that approach, I think that suggests that it was probably the right decision, because I think if they go out there and they try to counter press and they have a high line of confrontation, they probably get torched pretty badly.
Yeah. One more thing I just wanted to get your thoughts on. And then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the Vancouver series. But the big play of the game ends up being the clearance that Tino Lopez made. I think we both agree that that's just an outstanding play of hustle, but also skill. But what I'm curious on your thoughts were, Jackson Reagan, I think there's a lot of discussion of whether or not he got away with the penalty there. And after watching it, I'm not as convinced that it's the stone cold penalty some were having us believe. Like, if it got called, I don't know that I could complain. But the reason it didn't go to VAR, I think, is because Judd slows down and sort of kind of almost like draws the contact. And since he gets a good shot off, it clearly has not, stopped him from doing that. But am I being too rave green glasses on that one?
I mean, I don't think you are. If I were an Earthquakes fan, there's a pretty good chance I would think that you are.
Fair enough.
The way I always try to look at calls like that, right, is how pissed off would I be if this didn't get called for us? And I feel like this is one where I would have been frustrated and said, man, I wish we'd had a ref that would have given that penalty, but probably wouldn't have felt too aggrieved. I do truly think that that's the case. I think that on first look, I also thought that it was pretty lucky to get away with no call there, but they showed the clearance a million times, as they should have. And with each successive watch, it was pretty obvious what had happened. That he did just slow up to get a better chance at the shot off. Jackson does have to control his body there and not bowl him over, but he did that. I don't think he really put him off too much. Right? Yeah, I don't think he put him off too much. I think the reason that wasn't a goal is because Andrew Thomas made a good save and Tino Lopez made a heroic clearance off the line. So yeah, I think that if it gets called, I'm probably annoyed about it, but I probably accept it as a reasonable call. But I don't think we have any reason to feel guilty or that we really got away with one there.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of a part of the adage of this is why you don't leave your feet. Like, you're almost always more likely to get the benefit of the doubt if you make that sort of an upper body shove instead of a lower body tackle. Right. And I don't know. I guess I think that's a good way of putting it. Like, I just don't think, like, this has happened to Jordan a bunch of times, and I don't think he's ever gotten that call.
No.
And look, if Judd goes down, is it a penalty? Probably. But the reason he doesn't go down, I think, is because he still has what he thinks is a good shot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the proof is in the pudding there for me, right? Every striker in the world has a pretty good sense of whether or not they have a better chance of scoring than to make it worth it to stay on their feet. Right. He probably should have scored. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Andrew Thomas or Tino Lopez, but I think he probably should have scored that. And he didn't. And I don't think it was because Andrew Thomas or Jackson Reagan bumped into him lightly. I think it was because he just didn't finish it all that well. And it's just that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right, let's take a break. We're going to come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the Vancouver Whitecaps game. and some other stuff that's going on in the world of the Sounders. You're listening to Nos Audietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right. In the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newber. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Kat Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now. Nos Audietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code Sounder at Heart, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code Sounder at Heart at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Welcome back to Nos Audietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. All right, so a couple little housekeeping things before we get to the Whitecaps preview. One is it looks like I am going to be on Q13's Good Morning Seattle show tomorrow at like 10:30. So I was supposed to be on last week and I got canceled because of snow. Apparently that was a lot more compelling than soccer. I don't know. I can't guarantee that I will actually be on, but if you happen to hear this before and you want to watch me look like a fool on TV, this is your opportunity.
I'll be watching.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sure some friends will be watching, and I'm sure I'll get all kinds of notes about me. My wife will make sure I shave and pluck my nose hair and maybe even comb it, comb the top of my head. And
you're not going to wear a hat?
I won't wear a hat. No, I'll wear a beanie. Yeah,
there you go.
That would be a slick move, wouldn't it?
It would. Yeah, it would be pretty funny.
I'll also note we have some new stickers in the Sounder at Heart store. It is a sticker designed by Lickit, and it's going with the Ferrera Areola thing, combining them into one, inspired by Tim Foss Ferrari. It's a fun little sticker. It looks like the Ferrari logo, kind of with a whale. So those are available to purchase, or if you are I think a supporter or above, you can get some for free if you want to figure that out. And I will also just remind people that we still have magazines for sale, plenty of them. And if you haven't gotten it, please get in contact with me. I've fielded too many of these to realize that some did not get to their intended recipient, and I apologize. But if you haven't gotten one, it's probably lost in the mail. So get in touch. The U.S. mail apparently is not as reliable as it once was, if you've not heard.
I don't believe that.
Right. A lot of things don't work how they used to these days.
Yeah.
But
we should look into that. Somebody should.
We should look into that.
Somebody should do something about that.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a game on Wednesday in Spokane. I am planning on driving out there and potentially driving back in the same day, like we did for the game against Vancouver, except for twice as far. I don't know that this is the best plan, and so wish me luck. But this way I am able to take my kids to school the next day, so that's a important part of the familial responsibility. And you don't care about that. You just want to talk about the game, I bet. So let's talk about this game. Aaron, do you think that playing in Spokane is going to be a plus or a negative for the Sound? A positive or a negative?
I mean, I think that anytime you have to travel for a game, it's probably worse than not having to travel. So in that sense, that's
logic in that.
That's probably, but it's not a crazy trip.
It's like a 45-minute flight, I think, is what I understand.
Not too bad. It's going to be, I think, a really good crowd. It'll be a fun environment.
Yes.
I think that the people there are going to be really excited to get a chance to watch a very high level game. I think it's going to be a good game. I think the Whitecaps are going to come out flying. They've got some ground to cover, so I think they're going to come out and be aggressive, and so it should be a pretty entertaining game. And so in that sense, I think it's not as good as playing at Lumen, although depending on how good the crowd is, maybe it's better than this game would have been at Lumen, because I don't think there would be that many people there. Probably wouldn't have had.
It wouldn't be full. I think we can safely say that. Like, if this game was in Lumen, it would probably be 25,000 people, which is not a bad crowd, but it was not going to be raucous, I don't think.
Definitely. Yeah.
And this could be electric. I mean, I'm excited about this. I actually think the Sounders should, if this goes well, and it looks like, and I'm not saying the result, but like the whole thing, if it goes well, I think this is something they should look into trying to do on a regular basis. There's a lot of Sounders fans out on the dry side, as they call themselves, I learned.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea, but how do you make it a regular thing? Do you just play Champions Cup games? I don't know.
I'm not a logistics guy. Yeah, I'm not saying that. Maybe an Open Cup game.
Right. If they ever play in the Open Cup game again, I think it would be great to play in Spokane. I'm a little skeptical that they ever will play in the Open Cup again, but it would be. I think it would be great to play them there, and I'm not necessarily opposed to, like, if they're playing, Metapon or something like that.
Yeah.
Again, right? Like one of those teams. The new format makes that far less likely. But I wouldn't be opposed to doing something like that, or just playing like the inaugural Champions Cup game there every year that they're in the competition. I'm certainly not opposed to that. They could play Leagues Cup games there.
They could somehow.
I don't know if they could actually, but they might not be allowed to do that. But
they might not be. They're probably less likely to be allowed to do it. I don't know that I don't honestly know that they can choose to play. They might not actually have as much flexibility in this as I'm imagining, because I think most of these tournaments that now have rules about where you're supposed to play the games, because they don't want you to sort of move them to secondary facilities if you don't have to.
Right.
And, so whatever, maybe it's a fantasy, but I like the idea of playing this game there. I'll just say that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I will note that as of recording this, which, we're recording this around 9:00 at night, there are a few hundred tickets left, because CONCACAF was given 500 tickets to do whatever they wanted with. And then I guess they shockingly aren't using them. And so they were re-released. And so there's a whole bunch of tickets that CONCACAF had a hold on that just got released back into it. They're not cheap, they're all over $100. Sure. But there's going to be 5,000 plus people there. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. I would like to think that this is setting up to be there's no, I guess this is, I bring it up because in a normal situation, you're going home with a 3-0 lead, and there could be a let-off. There could be an emotional let-off. And I don't think that's really going to happen. Whether or not they, I think there's no good reason for them to have an emotional let-off here, because their crowd's going to be pumped up. They're presumably going to have their first choice group out there. They're playing a dangerous opponent. The Sounders should be going out there and, ideally looking for a win.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that if people are going to pack that stadium, pay some pretty hefty prices for tickets, and they're gonna come out and support. Like I think you have to give them a good show. You can't just sit there and counter and bunker and counter and just protect the lead. I think you got to go out and be at least a little bit aggressive. Obviously, the most important thing is getting through to the next round, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, and this is by all accounts a cool stadium, a nice stadium. So it should be. I think it should be fun for the players as well. A little better than Starfire, I think would be my guess.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I would rather. I don't. Okay, I don't know. I'm not gonna sit here and say they for sure should play. I would rather do this than play at Starfire, but I do think it's a better. It's a better overall environment than at Starfire.
sure,
And
yeah,
I like
I think
Starfire. I say that as someone who likes Starfire.
yeah, I think if not for the logistical issues, right? Like Spokane is further from Seattle than Starfire is. I think that's that's fair to say.
Yes, yeah, by a little
Um,
bit.
But yeah, I mean, I think that they should still have a pretty good home field advantage. It should be, it should be fun. This is certainly better than when they were playing games at Cheney Stadium. And I say as somebody who loves Cheney
Oh.
Stadium, and boy, that would be convenient for me. But this is better. I think it's cool that Spokane gets an actual game. I certainly think that they should explore maybe playing a friendly over there every now and again.
Yeah, maybe that's maybe a little more realistic, is playing an annual friendly in Spokane, which could also be a lot of fun.
I think that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that I the impression I get is that there is I don't think 5,000 people are coming from Seattle to go to this game. My impression is that this is a very local group, maybe season ticket holders, but season ticket holders who live over there,
right?
And probably not a lot of season ticket holders, realistically. Like I would love to at some point. I would like to find out the numbers, how many of these tickets actually sold during the season ticket presale, and how many of them were sold to Spokane soccer fans. I'll also note that I think we are doing a live show with Spokane Soccer Show and Lobbing Scorchers on Wednesday at Flat Stick Pub. I believe it's going to be at 5:00. So if you're going to be out there, if you're listening to this and you want to come experience the live show that is Lobbing Scorchers, come out there. Aaron, I just got to ask, did you happen to watch any of the live stream of us coming back from Vancouver?
No, I did not, because I was packing. I was packing for a trip that never ended up happening.
That's fine.
But well, I got punished by my trip being canceled. So
I know. That's exactly.
That's why it happened.
But yeah, I mean, I think the Sounders should feel good about this. There's not a lot of, it's funny. I went and looked up the history of 3-0 wins in Sounders history in like two-legged series. I don't think they've ever won an away leg by 3 goals in any. Well, yeah, no, I don't think they've done it in any competition. They were up 2-0 on the road against Houston in 2019.
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would remember that if that had happened, and like the most likely place for that to have happened would have been Champions League in like 2013 or something, I think.
Yeah, and they, last year, I mean, they tied the most goals they'd scored in a Champions League road game, which was 3, and that was against Antigua. They'd done it twice, and the most recent one was against Antigua, and that was a 3-1 win. So they'd never, like, coming home with a 3-0 lead is, I'm not going to sit here and say it's unprecedented, but it's really rare. Like, this is not.
Yeah.
This is not something. The Sounders, I don't think, have ever experienced this. Like I said, I would hesitate to see. There are probably not a lot of examples of anyone doing that. Like, and in a weird way, road goals kind of don't matter, because if Vancouver needs to score 4 goals, like, there's not the tiebreaker is not going to come into play here. But a 3-goal lead is great, and coming home with a 3-goal lead is even better.
Well, in the way that having that third goal does help is that Vancouver knows they have to score 3 goals.
Right?
Like,
exactly.
They have to score at least 3 goals, and that's just to get it to extra time, right? So it's
right.
it's a pretty big hill to climb. as far as I can tell, the only time the Sounders have ever scored 3 goals and in a away leg, they did it twice in 2012 against Caledonia and Marathon. So slightly higher level of competition in the Whitecaps. I think it's fair to say that Marathon team was really annoying to play. I remember them that from even that long ago, almost 15 years at this point. So I think that the Sounders are at their best, assuming that they're healthy and have a full, their full complement when they are playing their game. This isn't a situation like they had against the Earthquakes. They're going to have most of their guys that they've had this season at least.
Right.
There's an outside chance that Jordan gets some minutes here, right?
Brian Brian said that both Jordan and Hassani could potentially be available this coming week, but not like he didn't commit to that. He sounded more optimistic about Jordan being available for Wednesday than Hassani, but he made it sound like they could both potentially be available. I don't know how much stock. Neither one of them are going to start. I think we can say that. I would be surprised if either one of them play more than a few minutes. I guess Hassani technically is fit. It's just a matter of him going through concussion. I would just think it's easy to give him another day off if you can afford to do it. And the way that they set up the lineup on Sunday to me imply or suggest that they are not expecting to have Hassani for Wednesday, because otherwise you could play Brunel or you could play one of these other guys with the assumption that Hassani was going to be able to relieve them on Wednesday. But instead, I would assume it's going to be Roldan and Brunel in the middle.
Yeah, that makes sense. But at any rate, the initial point I think was just that there's no reason for the Sounders to sit back in a shell and let the Whitecaps run at them. Because if the Sounders get a goal and it goes to 4, it's really hard for me to see the Whitecaps continuing to press, right? And then maybe you can take your foot off the gas and have a nice, easy Wednesday night, if they can get a goal early and really put it to bed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I do expect the Whitecaps to come out guns blazing and play really aggressively, and they certainly have the guys to do that to put a scare in you. So it should be fun to watch. And if the Sounders are prepared for it and they play as well as they did in the first leg, maybe they score 3 again. Maybe this is they drop a Minnesota on them and over 2 legs.
Hey.
And I think going into that Minnesota game, if they can get a result like that, that's going to feel pretty good. That's going to give them some confidence and set them up, for success. And this, I think, has the potential to be tougher than their next. The Whitecaps as a team have a potential to be tougher
the Whitecaps,
than their next opponent.
The Whitecaps are better to me than Tigres or Cincinnati, and that's another thing. The Sounders, there is a benefit to winning this game. If they win this game, they are virtually guaranteed to host the second leg of the next series. And then they want to keep collecting as many points as possible because that puts them in better position to host. I don't know for certain whether or not they can host the next round at Lumen. If they had the first leg at home, I don't know for certain they can play it at Lumen Field, but I strongly suspect they can. And I'm almost positive they can host the second leg at home because that would be after the April 12th game. And I guess I might not be there for that now that I'm speaking it out loud, but
neither one of us would be, I don't think.
I picked a good time to take a vacation, but that's how it goes.
That's how it goes,
That's how it goes. Fingers crossed that the vacation happens. I should not.
You shouldn't take it for granted.
I should not. No, a lot of stuff going on in the world if you haven't noticed.
Yeah. Definitely.
It seems almost trite to be talking about vacations right now, but
you got to take time for yourself.
You do. I agree. Well, I think that's all I got. I think we're going to try to do a mailbag next week because there's a bye week. The next show is going to be coming during a bye week, so we'll have a little bit more time to air things out. So if you have questions you want to get answered, you should submit those on the Discord. As a reminder, we do all our questions on the Discord, and I think that's all we got.
Yeah.
I think that's all we got. All right. Well, let's get out of here. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Full Pool Wines. Of course, thank you to our subscribers. Thank you to Lickett, our producer. Thank you to Aaron for once again doing this with me. I am Jeremiah Oshan. This is No Saudi at This, part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network. Remember, you'll never get alone.
Let's go Sounders.